Hi, my name is Coral. Welcome back to my channel. I'm here today with the books that I ended up reading in July. July was an absolutely bananas month for me. My birthday was at the very beginning of the month. My daughter's birthday was also this month. So we had a couple things planned, obviously, for that, but then like a bunch of other things happened. Like I ended up having to fix up this room really fast, paint and put baseboards in because my bookshelves came. Then my birthday, like I said, my daughter's birthday, then we also did like a party and then a separate thing for her birthday. We went to the lake. I don't know, it was just like so many things. I also got to see one of my favorite music artists in concert. However, his tour only had a couple spots. It only had a couple dates because he's not like, I don't know, he's not someone you would hear on the radio yet. Maybe someday, like good for him, but he's a little, I mean, most of the stuff I listen to is not on the radio. Anyway, so the closest place he was touring was Salt Lake City, Utah, and I live in Southern California, and my sister-in-law was able to get VIP tickets because somebody was like selling them. They had bought them and they couldn't go, so it was like a little bit cheaper than buying seats. And so she's like, should we go to this? Is this too crazy? And we kind of talked ourselves into doing this really crazy thing where we drove 10 hours to see the concert that night and then had to drive 10 hours back home. I don't know, I just had so many days that were not days where I could have gotten any reading done. And I had only read like less than that. I'd read like 5 books, right? And then this week, in like 2 days, I ended up finishing like 3 more books. 2 of those were books that I like had been reading. One was like an audiobook, so it was like it all came together. I ended up reading 9 books this month. I'm gonna tell you about it. As I said, I managed to finish 9 books this month, and I really cannot believe that because, like I said, the amount of time I spent reading was not very much, I feel like. The genres I read were horror. I read 4 horror books, 3 fantasy books, and 2 nonfiction books this month. Very hoity-toity of me. And that amounted to 3,177 pages, which is about 102 pages per day. I mean, that's just the average. I definitely was not reading 102 pages every day. Like, that's crazy, because that means that I spent some days reading much more than that. I don't know how. So I had this page goal for the beginning of the year. I wanted to make sure that I read at least 35,000 pages. I decided to do that instead of a book goal this year. I think I did that last year too. I can't remember. Anyways, I was at the beginning of the month, 6,526 pages to that goal. So after what I read, I only have 3,349 pages till I reach that goal. I can knock that out next month, maybe. I shouldn't say that for sure. Another goal I had was to read books that I owned previous to this year, you know, make sure that I'm getting to that backlog because, you know, I buy a lot of fucking books and like, I just can't read them as fast as I buy them. So I need to make sure that I'm reading books that I bought in the past instead of only focusing on what I'm bringing in constantly. So I did read 5 books that I owned previous to this month, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it is more than half. So that's good. As far as the years these books were published, the oldest book I read this month was published in 1985. Then I have a book from 1995, a book from 2015, a book from 2016, then 2 books from 2019, and 3 new release 2021 books. My average star rating was actually 3.8 stars this month, which is not bad. There was only like 2 books that I read that were like, eh. So good. The formats of these books, let's see. I had 8 books that were considered like full novels and 1 novella. 8 of them were physical and 1 was an audiobook. And then, let's see, all 9 of them were considered adult. I had a 5-star prediction that I read this month. That was Gideon the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir. I'll get into that. And there was a book for the Buzzwordathon that I didn't end up getting to. I don't know. I mean, I'm filming this with a couple days left in July. I just don't anticipate being able to finish that book. I'm planning on starting it, but I don't think we'll be able to finish it by the end of the month. So I'm not even gonna include it in that. If I do end up reading it, you'll hear about it next month. It was The Last House on Needless Street by Katrina Ward, which has been on my TBR like 4 times now, I feel like. Holy cow. So one of these months I will finally get to it. Those are kind of my like reading statistics. Now I will tell you about each book individually. First, we have Come to Dust by Bracken MacLeod. This was published in 2017, and I did include this in a trope video I did this month, so if you want a more in-depth summary, you can look at that. It was about creepy kids. So this was about a young guy named Mitch, and he's taking care of his niece Sophie. Something happens to Sophie and she dies. It's like a really terrible accidental death, kind of. It's sad. So he is very grief-stricken, and a lot of the book was that, and I really liked that part of it, right? Him taking care of his niece and him being so sad about her death. But then kids everywhere start to rise from the grave. Dead kids, not normal kids. Dead kids. So, I mean, of course, there's content warning for that. We don't see this violence happen to Sophie, but we do see the aftermath of it. You know, so if that bothers you, you probably should skip this, because this is about people who have lost their children and those children coming back to life. And then I really think that the plot kind of, I don't know, it just was not my cup of tea after that. It gets into some weird religious stuff, which normally I like crazy religion in books, but this was just not, I don't know, it wasn't compelling enough to like be interested in. I thought it really ended up falling kind of flat, but I did like the first half. I don't know, it's hard to quantify, but if you want to hear more about that, like I said, the trope video about creepy kids, probably, I don't know, 2 videos from this one, 2 videos previous to this one. Then I read Gideon the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir. This is the start to a fantasy series. I mean, like, it is a fantasy series. I just don't know if like fantasy is exactly the correct genre to put this in, because a lot of it is like kind of steampunky and science fiction-y, but it deals with a lot of necromancers. It was kind of a really weird book. Unlike anything I've read before, I think. This is about Gideon, right? And she's from the 9th house, and there are 9 houses, and each of them does like a different sort of necromancy, and the leaders from these houses are called to like do this weird competition, and I don't remember what it's called, or if it even says what, I don't know. It's like if they succeed, they become, I think, like a resurrectionist or something like that, which is like an immortal being, an immortal, very powerful being, but they have to complete all these skills. And Gideon is not the leader of her house. She's just kind of a nobody in her house, kind of, but like also her house isn't very populated. There aren't a ton of like people there to choose from when her like house leader, I don't even remember all the terms from this, but the young woman's name is Harrowhark, and she's like the leader, the like heir to the throne of this house, right? So she gets this call, and she needs to bring a cavalier with her, like somebody to fight for her. And really, her and her cavalier should have been training for this for a long time, but for some reason she picks Gideon very quickly to be her cavalier, and like Gideon has not been trained to be a cavalier and shit like that. So it's just like kind of this weird duo who they don't really like each other, they don't really work well together, but they have to keep like, I don't know, the appearance that their house is doing okay up, right? So they go to this fucking weird place, and it's like each house seems like it's on a different planet. And if I'm saying like I think and like it seems like a lot, it's because the world building here was so weird and sparse, and it was really, really hard for me to visualize where all this stuff was taking place and what was happening in this world, which is the reason this book didn't get 5 stars for me, because I really love the plot and I love the characters, but I constantly was in my head trying to imagine like what everything looked like spatially, where they were and what they were doing, especially because they go to this other planet, right? And they have to do this test, like all these tests of their skills and stuff like that with the people from the 8 other houses, I suppose. And so they're like unlocking all these doors in this weird mansion, I think. And I just could not visualize anything that was happening, which drove me so crazy. So, like 5 stars for the plot, but like 2 stars for the world building in this. The setting was just so, I don't know. I mean, I like this enough to go on with the second book eventually, but I really do hope that it makes more fucking sense in my head than this did. Gideon was a great, fantastic, funny character, so was Hero Hark in her own way. They kind of despise each other, so there's that like, not a hate to love thing, but like a hate to maybe a friendship eventually thing. So that was fun. I like that. This is Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke by LaRocca. This is a new release book. It came out a couple months ago, and oh my gosh, it's just been burning a hole in my bookshelf, I guess. This is a novella, obviously. It's short and sweet. It is crazy. It's about these 2 women in the early 2000s, and they meet on a website that for queer people. It's like a message board, sort of. And the main character, Agnes, is, well, I don't know. Is she a main character? It's really hard. There's no clear main character. Both these women are kind of the main characters, because all of this is told in email or chat log. So when these women are talking to each other, all we know is what they're telling us, kind of. So they're both a little bit unreliable as far as narrators go. But Agnes, in the very beginning, she's trying to sell an apple peeler, right? And she gets contacted by this woman who pays her a lot of money to keep the apple peeler because it's kind of sentimental. The other woman's name is Zoe, and she definitely has the upper hand in the relationship that starts to form between these 2 women. Agnes, she's not somebody who, you know, she lives with a roommate. She doesn't have a lot of money, stuff like that. So Zoe quickly kind of love bombs her with this money and this attention. And they end up coming up with this contract to be like a sub and a dom. Zoe's the dom and Agnes is the sub, right? And they, you know, enter into this contract together for this relationship like that. And they both are willing participants, but things get really fucking dark in this story. Definitely content warning for people eating gross things and cruelty towards creatures and just any sort of content, you know, warning for toxic relationships. It's just so unsettling, and it made my stomach hurt, like both from what's happening in this book and also from thinking about the positions that these women were in and where they're coming from and why they would be susceptible to such a really toxic relationship. I think, you know, that phrase gets thrown around a lot these days, kind of flippantly, but that's really what ends up happening in this book, and it's just kind of explosive. And yeah, I mean, I think the one problem I had with the story is that it just happened so fast, this relationship. It was like 2 email exchanges basically, and they, you know, get into this relationship, and it's kind of weird. It doesn't seem like they felt each other out well enough to know that this would work between themselves. And obviously it doesn't, but I just mean like, how does Zoe feel out Agnes enough to know that she would be willing to be a submissive partner in a relationship, kind of, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I mean, I've never been in a relationship quite so terrible, so I don't know. Yeah, I mean, that's it. I really liked this book. I think the author is getting a lot of flack online that he doesn't deserve. They're saying, you know, a cisgendered dude should not be writing about relationships like this, which I think is unwarranted. I mean, you know, things like he isn't writing women characters well, and I think out of anyone writing books in this day and age, there are so many male authors who write female characters. I mean, there's Grady Hendrix, there's Riley Sager, Stephen King. I mean, so many men write female characters, and some of them do really good, like Grady Hendrix. But Stephen King even, like, sometimes he does not quite hit the mark. I think LaRocca did. I don't see, obviously I'm not in a queer relationship, but he's just writing about two people in a relationship, you know what I mean? So, I don't know. That's what I think about it. That's what I have to say about it. I thought this was so good. It is a really disturbing, it just like makes me sad to think about. And I think that's how I know it's a good book. Next, I have The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix. I furiously read this the last couple days. I just had so much going on. It was really hard for me to carve out the time to sit down and read up, you know, good chunks of it. But I read like the last half of it last night and early this morning. So, whew, it was a ride. And I mean, I just feel like this about most of Grady Hendrix books, but it's so hard for me to put them down once I start reading them. They're just so compulsively readable. So this was another new release book, and this is about a group of final girls. So if you don't know what like the term final girl means, it's like the woman at the end of the horror movie who has survived everyone else and killed the killer, right? So anyways, there's a group of women who've all been involved in like horrible mass death events, mass murder events, and have survived. And the main character's name is Lynette, and she was in kind of a horrible thing like this. But with what happened to her, the other final girls don't quite see her quite as an actual final girl. So she really feels ostracized even by this group of people who, you know, she sees monthly and has for years and years. And she definitely just cannot integrate back into society after what's happened to her. She is very, it's almost like doomsday preppery with the level of forethought and all these like escape routes she always has planned. And she's just in a constant state of like feeling like she needs to protect herself, even though for years and years she's been okay. But she really shows everyone when one of the final girls doesn't make it to group, and they find out later that she's been murdered by the brother of her like attacker, the person who made her a final girl in the first place. So everyone goes on like high alert, all the final girls, but Lynette really sees this bigger conspiracy through it all, and everyone's kind of convinced that she's just cuckoo, and she does seem kind of cuckoo, and we don't really know if she's not cuckoo for a lot of the book. So that was really interesting to me. I really do enjoy being in the driver's seat, I guess, or maybe the passenger seat. It was more like it, in a book where the main character is kind of being gaslit and told that they're being crazy by everyone around them. I don't want to experience that in real life, but I do find that a compelling thing in a book. So that's really all that I feel like I want to tell you about the plot. I did enjoy this so much. I can agree with some reviews that I said, or that I read, where people were saying that some of the characters were really one-dimensional, just like they would be in a slasher film, and I don't know if that was purposeful or not. It could be. It seems like Grady Hendrix really thinks about really minuscule ways to develop his story, or really minuscule details when it comes to stuff like that. So I don't know if that was purposeful. I didn't mind it, I guess, because I don't know, I guess I just wasn't super apparent to me until I read that and I was like, oh yeah, that might be kind of right. But I did like Lynette as a main character. Well, I don't know. She was kind of annoying sometimes, I guess. It wasn't that, like, I think I would like her personally, but I thought she was a good main character. But I think what I like the most about this is all the little kind of Easter eggs that Grady Hendrix put in here. Every final girl has a story that could be linked to a certain, like, slasher franchise like Scream or Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Halloween. A few details, you know, a few details changed here and there, but I thought that was a lot of fun. I just thought this was fun. I just liked it. And I thought about doing a whole separate review from that, but I don't think I have anything super profound to say about it. Just like, I liked it. I liked the characters. I liked the plot. I liked the inclusion of the details of, you know, the slasher movies and stuff like that. I thought it was good. I thought it was worth reading. Okay, this I will just talk about briefly because it's going to be included in a trope video sometime this year, probably at the end of this year. October, I think is the next one. So this is The People in the Attic by Doretta Johnson, and this book was so dumb and annoying and horrible. I thought it was so fucking boring. It was so boring. I just struggled through it the entire time. It was never at any point scary. There are like photos in the middle where like, it was like, see, this is the orb, and it's like, that just looks like a light shining, like a flashlight shining on this closet door. It's just shit like that. Like, it was not scary. I really feel like this woman wrote this book, or I guess used this book as an excuse to just write about herself, and I don't know. That's all I have to say about it. Next up is Weaveworld by Clive Barker. How do I even go about explaining what this book is about? This was a book that I was listening to as my bedtime audiobook. It helps me sleep at night, helps my brain, you know, because otherwise I get like anxiety brain where I'm like running through scenarios that are not going to happen, or just like focusing on shit that doesn't matter and just makes me anxious. And instead, I fall asleep within a couple minutes, usually, probably like 15-20 minutes, listening to an audiobook, which is nice. So I've been listening to this for quite a while. It's a big book. This one was published in 1987, I think. I'm trying to remember to tell you the publication dates, but I don't always remember. So this is one of Clive Barker's like fantasy books, but it's very Clive Barker-y, you know. He's got like a lot of fanciful language, purple prose, I think they call it. This is about a young dude named Cal, and he's like just fucking around one day, and he ends up seeing this like tapestry or like this rug, and he can tell that there's something about it that is so strange and magical. And it turns out that this rug is, or this tapestry, I don't know, it's just the weave. They call it the weave, right? So he finds out that it is like a magical world hidden in our world, and these people in it are called the seer kind, and they have to hide from this thing called the scourge that is trying to kill them all. So they've hidden in this weave. But a couple humans know about the weave, and they are not very good people, and they're trying to basically sell the weave, things like that. They don't care about keeping the seer kind alive and away from the scourge. They just care about being bad dudes. So I don't know, I could really get in deep into the plot of this. I won't. It would just take so long, and I do that enough. I do that enough with other books, but this was really good. I will say that it felt really long, and that could be also the way I was listening to it, you know, because I don't always stay up for 20 minutes. It doesn't always take me 20 minutes to fall asleep. Sometimes it takes me like 10, and then I have to like go back, find where I fell asleep, you know, things like that. So that could have definitely made it seem longer than it was, but it did feel very long. I did really love the end, though, the conclusion. If I rated it, I'd give it a 4 stars. I thought it was a really fun fantasy, a darker fantasy, you know. There are some dark things that happen in this, but good. Okay, next, before I forget about it, I listened to The Icepick Surgeon by Sam Kean. This I listened to on audio, and this was another 2021 release. I must have rented it from my library like the day it came out, inadvertently. Just like, I was looking through the audiobooks and I saw that and I was like, So this was about some of the history of the medical field and kind of bad things that scientists, well, it wasn't just the medical field, it was just science in general, right? But like bad things that science has done in the name of science, like there's like a pirate who really loved natural history, but he was a pirate, or like another dude who loved natural history, but he kind of got involved with the slave traders, and I don't know, it gets even more modern, like a woman who worked for a lab where they would test drugs for court trials, and she was not testing things properly and probably sent hundreds or thousands upon thousands, actually it's probably more like hundreds of thousands of people to prison for no reason. And the state that she worked in had to pay millions of dollars in restitution, and they had to let like everyone go, any case that she was involved with, whether they would have been guilty or not. Now, like, we'd never know. So it's just, you know, how sometimes scientists sometimes do bad things. This one also did have some hard things to listen to read about. For example, it talks about Edison and his trials, I don't know, just like trying electricity on animals and things like that. It talked about a scientist who was really involved in the first kind of surgeries for intersex people, where they would decide to give them genitals, and like a lot of the times that person grew up and was very confused for a long fucking time because like their brain did not match the stuff going on downstairs, you know what I mean? So cruel, and you know, some of it was really hard to listen to, but I thought it was pretty good. The one thing that really threw me off for this was that the author, and I don't know if this is just the audiobook or if this would be the print too, but the author kept like alluding to like other podcasts and other books that he had written to, and like written to. I don't know, what am I saying now? And that included like the website. So it'd be like in the middle of this reading, it'd be like, go to www.blah/blah blah blah _ blah 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 dash, you know, and it was like, I don't know, it was just really fucking weird. But I thought it was good. But like I said, some sensitive subjects for sure. Next, I read Magic for Liars by Sarah Gailey. This came out in 2019. I listened to part of this on audio when I was setting my bookcases up, and I liked the audio narration, but like I feel like the narrator was too good. Like she was really getting into the ways that people would talk. You know what I mean? Like real people talk, or like noises, or like, you know, like gasps and gulps that people would make if they were really speaking, which I kind of didn't like. Anyway, this is about a detective, and she is like a normal mortal human being. However, her twin sister is magic, and most of the world does not know about these magic people. She just does, obviously, because, you know, her sister's involved in this magic world. And she's a private investigator, and she gets asked to investigate this death at the school that her sister works at, the school for mages. And so it's kind of like if Hogwarts were like in my neighborhood, I guess, you know, instead of a crazy like English countryside shit, you know. So it's just like a normal fucking school for these kids who live in America, but they also happen to do magic. And I thought this was pretty good. The magic was fun. This is definitely not something, if you're looking for something on par with one of these like epic fantasy series about magic, it's not that, right? It's just a little snippet into this world, and that's it. And I appreciated that it was just that, and not, you know, a series long thing. The magic isn't like super well explained. You just, you know, you have to go in there knowing that this is magic, and it's kind of unexplainable, and it's weird, and it's fun, and it's dangerous. and I ended up liking it. Last but not least, this is Missoula by Jon Krakauer. I really cracked through this book yesterday. I'm gonna read what this says on the bottom here. Missoula, Montana is a typical college town, home to a highly regarded state university whose beloved football team inspires a passionately loyal fan base. Between January 2008 and May 2012, hundreds of students reported sexual assaults to the local police. Few of the cases were properly handled by either the university or the local authorities, and this, Missoula, is also typical. So I don't think he means to single out Missoula as like a terrible place, the only terrible place where this happens, because this is something that happens in most college towns where they have a problem with students raping other students and getting away with it. So this is what this whole book is about. Obviously, if that is a really sensitive topic for you, you probably do not want to read this. It goes into graphic detail, but I don't feel like it's gratuitous, because a lot of this is the women who were victims, the women who were victimized. It is them telling their own story. It's not like creepy little Jon Krakauer like trying to get the Law and Order SVU gist of it, you know what I mean? So, and I didn't expect it to be weird or creepy coming from Jon Krakauer, because I think he is somebody who writes with integrity, and he really wants to send a message when he writes things. And in this case, the message is that colleges and college towns, the authorities in college towns often do not properly take care of things like this. And I think there's this point that he kept hammering, which I feel like is really important, and it makes this stuff so much easier to understand, is that rape is like the only crime where people second guess what the victim's saying, you know what I mean? So if this woman were to say, I got mugged, no one would say, did you really? I don't believe you. Were you drunk? What were you wearing? You know what I mean? That only happens in rape cases. If you get stabbed in the subway, no one's like, are you sure? Are you sure that happened? Do you remember right? Maybe you were drunk. Did you ask for it? So, like, why the fuck do we do that? Obviously, the authorities need to look into the event, but really, there are lots of times where people get away with stuff like this for no reason. And it seems like, at least from what I was reading for these couple of cases that he talked about in Missoula, it seems like even the police, they start out with this rapport, which seems so bizarre. It's like they want to be buddies with this football player immediately. Like, that's the rapport that they have. It's like, we're friends, we don't think you did this, just right away without even examining anything. So it's infuriating, it's hard to read, but I think it was a really interesting read, sometimes repetitive with the details, especially because he talks about the case, and then eventually it goes on to the court cases, if there were, you know, charges presented against these rapists. So it was like, you kind of hear about it twice, but I mean, that's just the nature of books like this sometimes. So I thought this was a really great book. I just really have enjoyed everything I've read by Krakauer. He's a great investigative journalist, and he's very, very thorough, and he treats the victims kindly, at least from what I can tell in his books. But I think he does. So that's that. Oh my gosh, that's my wrap up for July. I didn't think it would take me so long to talk about these couple of books that I read, but it did. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you've read any of these and what you thought. I'd really like to know if you read Gideon and whether you had the same issue with the world building that I did. I don't know if I'm alone. Maybe I should go read some of the reviews on Goodreads. But anyways, thank you. I will see you guys later. Goodbye.